The sound of his 8-year-old son crying cut through Detective Marcus Williams like a blade through flesh. He dropped his morning coffee and sprinted toward the playground, his heart hammering against his ribs as he saw Jalen crumpled on the asphalt, blood trickling from his scraped knee. Standing over his son was Rick Morrison, the Oakwood Hills HOA security coordinator, a glorified neighborhood watch captain with delusions of actual authority. Morrison's face was twisted with the kind of righteous anger that came from years of unchecked power and racial resentment. "I told you kids to stay off the playground equipment," Morrison barked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been told no. "This area is for residents only," Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. "That is my son, and we do live here." Morrison's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Sure you do. In subsidized housing, maybe. This playground is for property owners only. Real residents." The words hung in the morning air like poison gas. Real residents. As if Marcus's mortgage payments, property taxes, and 20 years of military and police service didn't qualify him for membership in Morrison's twisted definition of community. "Get up, boy," Morrison sneered, reaching down to grab Jalen's arm with unnecessary force. "Find somewhere else to play with your kind." That's when Marcus saw red. The detective training kicked in first. Assess the situation, control the variables, protect the victim. But beneath the professional response, something primal was awakening, something that had been pushed down through years of being the only black officer in his department, the only black family in his neighborhood, the only black voice in every meeting that mattered. "Take your hands off my son. Now." Morrison turned, finally noticing the 6'2" frame of Marcus Williams approaching Y.
"And what are you going to do about it, officer?" Morrison spat, somehow making the word officer sound like a slur. "Call your buddies down at the station? We both know how that works out for people like you." People like him? The phrase echoed in Marcus's mind as he looked at his son's tear-streaked face, at the small crowd of neighbors gathering to watch the spectacle, at Morrison's smug expression that suggested this wasn't his first time asserting dominance over someone he deemed unworthy. Rick Morrison had just made the most catastrophic mistake of his miserable life. He had no idea who he was dealing with, but he was about to learn that some battles have consequences that last forever. The incident report that Marcus filed that afternoon was clinical, professional, and devastating in its precision. 20 years of police work had taught him that the most powerful weapon against injustice wasn't anger, it was documentation. But the response from the Oakwood Hills HOA board was swift and predictable. Within hours, Marcus received a formal complaint letter accusing him of aggressive behavior and intimidating security personnel. The narrative had been flipped with surgical precision. He was now the aggressor, Morrison the victim. The emergency HOA meeting 3 days later felt like a tribunal designed for his humiliation. The community center was packed with residents Marcus barely knew, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. He sat in the back with his wife Sarah and 8-year-old Jalen, whose bandaged knee served as a silent testimony to Morrison's security methods. Board President Catherine Mills commanded the room from behind a polished podium, her silver hair and tailored suit projecting the kind of authority that came with old money and older prejudices. "We're here to address the recent altercation involving Detective Williams and our SE. Security Coordinator," Catherine announced, her voice dripping with false neutrality. "Mr. Morrison has filed a formal complaint." Morrison stood up, transformed from neighborhood bully into wounded victim. "I was simply enforcing community guidelines when Detective Williams became verbally aggressive and threatening. I feared for my safety." The lie was so audacious it took Marcus's breath away, but he recognized the strategy, flip the script, make the victim the aggressor, let unconscious bias do the rest.
Furthermore, Morrison continued, his confidence growing with each word, I believe Detective Williams has been using his position to intimidate residents. Some neighbors have expressed concerns about having a police officer living among them. The murmur of agreement that rippled through the crowd felt like a physical blow. These people, his neighbors, whose property values his presence had helped maintain, whose safety his profession protected, were nodding along with Morrison's fabricated narrative. Catherine's smile was razor-sharp. "Detective Williams, would you like to respond?" Marcus stood slowly, feeling 50 pairs of eyes tracking his movement. He'd testified in countless courtrooms, faced down armed criminals, survived tours of duty in Afghanistan. But this felt different. This was personal in a way that cut deeper than any physical threat. "My son was playing on a playground that serves the entire community," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "Mr. Morrison used excessive force against an 8-year-old child. That's not security, that's assault." "That's your interpretation," Catherine replied dismissively. "Mr. Morrison was enforcing established guidelines. Perhaps if you'd taken the time to familiarize yourself with community standards..." Community standards, the eternal euphemism for keeping certain people in their place. "Which guidelines specifically prohibit children from using playground equipment?" Marcus asked, pulling out a copy of the HOA bylaws he'd memorized that morning. The silence that followed was telling. There were no such guidelines. Morrison had acted purely on his own prejudices, secure in the knowledge that the board would support him against the outsider, regardless of facts. But what the board didn't know was that Marcus Williams wasn't just any detective. His 20-year career had taken him from military police to federal task forces to specialized units that most people never heard about. His clearance level required background checks that went back generations. His service record included commendations from agencies that Ted in shadows. Most importantly, the phone call he'd received that morning, the one that would change everything, had come from someone very interested in his particular combination of skills, experience, and moral character. Rick Morrison and the Oakwood Hills HOA board were about to discover that some battles have consequences they never saw coming, the kind of consequences that reshape entire communities. The phone call that would change everything came at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, but would end like nothing Marcus had ever experienced. "Detective Williams, this is Mayor Jennifer Santos. I need to speak with you immediately about a matter of utmost importance." Marcus nearly dropped his coffee mug. The mayor of their mid-sized city didn't make personal calls to detectives unless something monumental was happening. His mind raced through possibilities. Federal investigation, corruption scandal, terrorist threat. "I'll be direct," Mayor Santos continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone making a decision that would reshape the political landscape. "Chief Harrison is retiring, effective immediately. The department needs new leadership, and your name has come up repeatedly as the ideal candidate." Police chief. The words hit Marcus like lightning. The position that controlled law enforcement for the entire region, including the wealthy suburbs where Oakwood Hills sat like a fortress of privilege. "Mayor, I'm honored, but there's more," she interrupted. "Internal Affairs has been investigating complaints about selective enforcement in affluent neighborhoods, specifically incidents involving private security contractors operating beyond their authority. Your recent experience makes you uniquely qualified to address these issues." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The mayor knew about Morrison, knew about the HOA incident, knew about the systematic harassment that masqueraded as community security. "The city council votes Thursday morning," Mayor Santos continued. "I need to know if you're interested in completely reforming how we approach community policing in this city." Community policing. The phrase carried new weight now, loaded with possibilities that made Marcus's heart race. But what the mayor didn't say, what she couldn't say over the phone, was that this wasn't coincidence. Federal investigators had been watching Oakwood Hills for months, following complaints about civil rights violations disguised as homeowners association enforcement. Marcus's incident with Morrison had provided the catalyst they needed to justify intervention. The new police chief position came with expanded jurisdiction and federal backing to investigate private security operations that had been operating in legal grey areas for years. Rick Morrison's assault on Jalen hadn't just crossed a line, it had triggered a federal civil rights investigation that was about to sweep through every HOA and private security company in the region. "I need time to consider this," Marcus said, though his mind was already racing ahead to possibilities. "Of course, but Detective Williams, the ceremony is scheduled for Friday morning. If you accept, you'll be sworn in as Chief Williams. The Oakwood Hills community will be your first official area of focus." As Marcus hung up the phone, he looked across the kitchen at his wife Sarah, who had been listening with growing amazement. Their eyes met, and he saw the same realization dawning in her expression. Rick Morrison had pushed the wrong child. The HOA board had targeted the wrong family. And now the entire system that had protected their little kingdom of prejudice was about to come crashing down around them. Justice wasn't just coming to Oakwood Hills. Justice was about to be sworn in as their new boss. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that seemed to herald momentous change. Marcus stood on the steps of City Hall in his dress uniform, surrounded by family, colleagues, and media cameras that had turned out for the historic swearing-in ceremony. But the most satisfying moment came when he spotted a familiar figure in the crowd, Rick Morrison, standing with the Oakwood Hills HOA board, their faces masks of barely controlled panic. They had come expecting a routine ceremony, perhaps hoping to ingratiate themselves with the new police chief. They had no idea they were about to witness the elevation of the man whose family they'd tried to destroy. Mayor Santos stepped to the podium, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd with ceremonial gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to swear in Chief Marcus Williams, whose distinguished career and unwavering commitment to justice make him the ideal leader for our community." Marcus saw the exact moment recognition dawned on Morrison's face. The color drained from the security coordinator's cheeks as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Catherine Mills, the HOA board president, looked like she was about to faint. "Chief Williams," the mayor continued, "your first official act will be to oversee a comprehensive review of private security operations throughout our jurisdiction, with particular attention to civil rights compliance." Marcus raised his right hand and took the oath that would give him authority over every law enforcement operation in the region, including the investigation that was about to tear through Oakwood Hills like a hurricane. "Do you solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution and laws of this state, to serve and protect all citizens equally, and to ensure justice for every member of our community?"
"I do," Marcus replied, his voice carrying across the crowd with the finality of a judge's gavel. As the badge was pinned to his chest, Marcus looked directly at Morrison and smiled. The man who had pushed his son was about to learn what real authority looked like. 6 months later, Chief Marcus Williams stood in the same playground where Rick Morrison had assaulted his son. But everything had changed. Morrison was facing federal civil rights charges and had been banned from all security work. The entire Oakwood Hills HOA board had resigned in disgrace after the investigation revealed years of discriminatory practices. Catherine Mills had sold her house and moved to another state to escape the scandal. Most importantly,
The playground was full of children from every background, their laughter echoing across a community that was learning what true security looked like. Protection for everyone, not just the privileged few. Jalen ran up to his father, his knee long since healed, but the lesson forever remembered. "Daddy, are you really the boss of all the police now?" Marcus knelt down to his son's eye level, looking into the same dark eyes that had been filled with tears that terrible morning. "I'm the boss of making sure every kid gets to play safely, no matter who they are or what they look like." As father and son walked home together, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Sometimes justice arrived slowly, methodically, with the weight of official authority behind it. Rick Morrison had pushed the wrong child on the wrong morning, and now every child in the community was safer because of it.